Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and since 2010, I have interviewed hundreds upon hundreds of songwriters about the writing process. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So I've always been interested in treating songwriters the same way that we treat poets and traditional prose writers, as writers, plain and simple. There is no talk of how bands get their name, favorite tour stories, favorite foods, band drama, or anything else. This is an intelligent conversation about the writing process between two writers as we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process. That's it, nothing else. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, it is Jade Bird. Bird's new album is called Who Wants to Talk About Love on Glassnote Records. I love what she said at some point during the conversation when we talked about the specifics of the process with the pen and the paper. And she said, I'm realizing how neurotic I am as I'm talking to you when we talk about how certain the specifics of the type of pen and the color of ink and things like that. We also talked a lot about, and I wrote this down, this quote. She said, fear is a huge thing in our art form. And what she means by that is we can't be afraid to write the bad stuff. I talk a lot about that in these interviews, about being uninhibited in the early stages of creativity. And if you're afraid to write the bad stuff, you'll never get anything done. And again, her quote is, fear is a huge thing in our art form, and we can't have fear. If we want to be successful, we can't be afraid to write the bad stuff. I also love what she said about walking. You know, we talk a lot about the role of movement in the process. And she said, yes, I walk, but her walking is very practical. It's because she says, my back is so stiff after writing because I'm so focused and bent over as she's writing with the pen and the paper that she gets up and she's so stiff, so she has to go walk around to loosen up. And I love that. But she said, and this is the exact opposite of the exercise, she finds naps, and this is where we talk about Dolly, naps to be a productive part of her creative process. Again, this is a great conversation. I love the specifics of the process there. And again, the new album is called Who Wants to Talk About Love on Glassnote Records. Here's my interview with Jade Bird. Are you an everyday type of writer, or do you write when the mood strikes? Do you feel that it's important to create in some fashion every day, whether it's journal writing, songwriting, anything like that?
So I changed, interestingly. When I was a kid, I must started songwriting when I was about 12 or 13. And I used to write every day because I had this feeling and this sense that songwriting is a discipline, as a craft. If I ever wanted to get close to my heroes, I was going to kind of have to put the hours in. And then I became a big believer in the sort of 10,000 hours theory. So I literally was just writing every day. And then I hit this point when I must have been about 25, I think, because it was in the pandemic and I was trying to, apply the same approach. And the songs I was writing they weren't good enough at all. I wasn't particularly moved. I felt like I was diluting the feeling, not, in a good way, into like material. So then I strike when the mood's hot and I'll give it, sometimes a week up until a month and then sit down and write a whole bunch of songs. But it differs now than it used to.
So even that's interesting you say that because, a lot of writers, not just songwriters, but writers will say you got to really start off with the bad stuff to get to the good stuff. But it sounds like you weren't willing to do that.
Yeah.
You didn't like the bad stuff. So you stopped, and that's why you stopped writing every day.
I think it was a sense of, we're talking about 15 songs that I didn't feel like were going to make an album, and I think at that point I was like, this doesn't seem like my usual thing of quantity over quality to almost find that gem is really working. And there was an element that I felt like, I've been doing this for over 10 years. I think maybe I'm good enough at my craft that if it's right, I'm going to make something good, and maybe don't have to, maybe it's the other factors that I need to control over just being like sitting down and doing it. But that definitely changed.
So if it's not happening after a week or a couple weeks or whatever, do you get anxious feeling like, okay, what's the deal? I should be writing, but why is this not happening?
So it's hard to say because is since changing my process, I did the record after this one. This one took me 4 years because there were so many life events that happened. And I felt like I was processing my life and these life events in real time. Like I broke up with my fiance that I was with for 5 years. I thought I was going to be with for the rest of my life. It was very messy. And writing at the end of the day is literally my processing tool, and has always been. I'll feel like there's no way out. I'll sit down, I'll write a song. Something's there on the page to tell me about that experience, even if it's a warning for the future or whatever. I've become, a little bit superstitious about it, to be honest with you. Um, so yeah, I feel like now I'll go to upstate New York, which is a bit like my zone. It's my happy place as a writer. And I will be able to just write 6 songs and they'll all make this record that's the one after the one I'm releasing. I feel in a place with that everything I am writing there, I'm like, oh, this is a keeper. This is a keeper. The duds are lesser and lesser the more time I take in between.
So if you are there things that you techniques that you use to kind of jumpstart the process? If you feel like you want to write, but it's not happening, are there techniques or quirks that you use to jumpstart it?
Yeah, always. So I'm a big believer in like everything's behind the words. I know that sounds really simple, but I've always just had this real fascination with like a good title, or if someone says something to me, it's being jotted down. Like my ultimate favorite songs come from a phrase that it feels like it's come right out of someone's mouth. So like my favorite songs of all time, songwriting wise, are probably like I Can't Make You Love Me, because I can imagine being like, I can I can move the whole world, but like, I just can't make you love me. And the other one's probably like, You Should Probably Leave by Chris Stapleton. That does sound like, this guy doesn't want to get hurt. And he's like, it's too late, you should finish your wine and you should probably leave, So I do that with everybody. You got to be careful when you're with me if you say something, being it you've run through a tornado the other day and I'm like, oh, that's a brilliant title. Or like, why do you always bring the rain? And I'll write a song about that. So, yeah.
So I'm guessing if I'm with you and you pull out your phone and open up that notes app, I should be worried.
100%, 100%. But also like little tricks if you're asking, I also go through books. When I was really stuck when I was a kid, when I was kind of doing this thing, I would literally go by page by page and see if anything stood out and write it down. And then I do a little mind map. So I'll do a concept in the middle and I'll just straight up whatever's on the surface. So I'm doing a spider diagram and it's rain, drain, candle, then flame, then this and that, and then anything that comes to your mind, and you just end up with a spider diagram, and sometimes that helps too.
It's funny you say that. I had Suzanne Vega on a couple of months ago, and she mentioned that she keeps, I think, a
Oh, wow,
thesaurus
amazing.
and a rhyming dictionary next to her and finds those books to be useful if she's searching for. It's funny because I think people don't imagine
Yeah.
songwriters consulting those things. They feel like those words just come out of, but hey, she said, yeah, I've got those books on my desk. And when I'm struggling, I open up that thesaurus, that rhyming dictionary, and it really helps me.
Yeah, because also I think one thing I've really learned, and I think I keep going back to this book, the David Lynch book, Catching the Big Fish. I think sometimes, because he describes it as you get a little idea, you get a little fish and you'll catch it, and you sort of ruminate on the idea. And then the idea, he uses it in this like approach for meditation, and then the idea will get bigger and get bigger. And like the longer I've been doing this, the more I realize it's kind of what you store in the back of your brain and you allow to sit and then you reappropriate. And that's where you get these really beautiful metaphors that you wouldn't have come up with off the cuff. Do you know what I mean? It's not always the first thing you think of when you look at like flame, the word flame. There might be a beautiful twist on that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It also has to do with recognizing that eureka moments never happen when you're thinking about those eureka moments, right?
Oh, 100%. I think there's that part of your brain. I've been kind of looking it up or something, and it's like there's like certain part they call it like your oh, I'm gonna really bomb here. But there is this creative part of your brain that's on that goes off when you're sort of in this business mode. And I just imagine it like you're storing everything in that part of your amygdala or whatever it is. So while you're doing your sort of functioning every day, that's festering in a good way, you know?
Agatha Christie, the writer, said the best time to write a book is when you're uh, doing the dishes. And so the idea that your ideas come, the thought that your best ideas come to you when you're engaged in activities that require no conscious thought. So very specifically, the ideas come to you when you're vacuuming, when you're cleaning, when you're doing laundry, when you're mowing the lawn, when your brains are engaged in activities that require no conscious thought. And that's why they say we get our best ideas in the shower. That's when those unconscious ideas are able to
Yeah.
bubble up. So, yeah, your take on that.
Yeah, 100%. I remember reading about John Prine, and he was like he had no radio in his car, so he could be constantly driving around, and all these melodies and everything would come into his head while he was driving. I think that's exactly what you're saying. That's the nail on the head. Yeah.
I have a David Byrne quote right up here. David Byrne said, "A car is a good place to write the lyrics. Driving occupies one part of the brain, freeing up the other."
Oh, incredible. Well, he's the master. So we've heard it there first.
But it has to be a drive, though, where you know where you're going. Because I wouldn't happen to me if I were driving and I'd never been to that place before, because my brain has to be focusing on where I'm going.
You know, it's interesting. You were saying that maybe in a more physical sense, but I almost heard that as a little bit metaphorical, where it's like, you know, if I think about it and I have an album I want to do or a book I want to write, I think it's them ideas that you get given by this sort of grace of God, almost something no one can really describe why or how. That's why, you know, there's so much conversation on this. But I think it's the drive and the discipline that will sort of allow you to harness it. And that's exactly what I'm saying when it was like I wanted to hone my craft. It was that process I wanted to get better at. So now when them gems from wherever source like sort of come down upon me, I feel more equipped to be like, you know, this is the course I want to write, or this is the chapter I want to do, or you know.
So, are you doing other types of writing besides songwriting? Do you journal ever?
So Ben, it's really interesting you ask because I kind of have a dream to write fiction. I'm really actually super interested in what's kind of going on in the world right now. And I find it really harrowing. And I find that I've got so much empathy that I don't quite know how to contribute with my art because my songs have always been an escape for myself, especially where it started. And so like I'm really into like dystopian fiction and like really would one day hope to like complete a few ideas I've got there. So I'm brand new to the process, by no means, you know, honed that skill at all, but definitely ambition to write that way. Because journaling, I weirdly feel slightly embarrassed by my journaling. I've tried, and I've got this kind of beautiful journal. When I first met my boyfriend, that was like, oh, I've got a year of that noted down. I'm really grateful for, but I have a whole thing with journaling. It's a confusing relationship.
So, when you mentioned the messy events earlier. When those messy events happen, do you need distance to be able to write about those things, or is immediacy more important?
I think it's the immediacy for me. That's definitely where I write the good stuff because it's not, you're not like sort of marketing your emotions. Do you know what I mean? That's a horrible phrase, but you don't get any time to work out what people are going to think or even what you think yourself. You just are feeling this violent feeling, which I am, you know, very, I get incredibly violent feelings, be them like happy or sad. I really feel things. And so if I just show up to my guitar and go, "Oh, please just grant me some solace in this. I am so overwhelmed, and I can't afford a therapist." You know, when I do just show up, it gives me these answers that sometimes I don't even see as answers. Sometimes they're just like it's really hard to explain, but like little motifs, or you know, sometimes they're aggressive and harsh and don't paint me in a good light, but they're just words on the page, you know?
So, those ideas that come to you quickly, um, all in a rush, whether it's a song that happens in, 15 minutes or something like that. Um, are you more likely to say, you know what, there's a reason why that happens so quickly, I'm not going to touch it? Or do you still go back and revise and edit those ideas that did happen all at once?
Yeah, I love that question because it's another thing that's completely changed. When I was younger, I was like, whatever is the first idea is the best idea. Don't mess with it. Don't rewrite. If you have to rewrite, it's not good enough. And I now think that's pretty ridiculous because, maybe that's because I'm getting into the novel thing where all you do is rewrite, 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 and it gets better and better and better. I do think there's this beautiful moment as a songwriter, if you're lucky enough to get it, where you do, it is this religious experience where you just go, for me, it was this song called Avalanche I released, and I was in a really low place in my life. And I came to the studio and I hadn't really accepted where I was at emotionally. And I remember sitting down, I played a chord. It was, sun shines through the ice. I realize I'm frozen, you know, you buried in tight, crystallized in this life I've chosen. And it was just boom, like chord, lyric. And it became this metaphor is in this song called Avalanche about being literally buried in my own life. And I didn't stop for a second to think about what I was doing or what it meant so those moments and the immediacy of that is the true beauty of the whole profession, to be honest, as dramatic as it sounds.
I want to ask you about upstate New York because we lived in it. I spent 5 years in upstate New York. We used to live there when I was a professor up near at Colgate University, which is near
Oh,
Syracuse. So
wow.
really, really remote. Um, Now, this is just my take on it. We live outside of Washington, D.C. right now,
Mhm, mhm.
bigger city. I had about a good year in a small town before I just could not take it anymore. Um, I found it to be incredibly stifling. But but clearly you go up there and you find that to be fruitful. So do you think that you'd be as effective as a writer if you wrote in, let's say, Central Park? I mean, I think practically some people need chaos to be able to write. They find that motivating. Other people really need
Mhm.
serenity. So it sounds like you favor more of the serenity. So why do you think upstate New York is so makes you so productive?
It's a strange mixture of things. I think there's a confidence I have because when I took my EP, my very first EP, I took 5 songs up there and I met Simon Felice and David Barron. They did my first records and we worked in this beautiful studio called the Clubhouse, and it became this complete haven where I was so grateful to be there, but so motivated to continue to, have a career that would allow me to be there, that I was writing all these songs. And a lot of the songs that I put out, this song called Lottery or, Aha, I wrote there because of that concoction. So then now when I revisit there, not only do I feel this spiritual serenity just from being there, I did when I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, it just the whole world shuts down and I'm just at peace. But also I think there's this confidence that I'm like, I've got brilliant stuff there before. I can get it again. But it's interesting you say about the city because I remember writing, I used to do these week writing things just for myself where I just write every single day, try and write as many songs as I could. And I went to the city and I wrote really industrial, dark songs. They were more like PJ Harvey than maybe what I would associate with myself, which was cool, but not necessarily as useful as going and writing songs that would make an album. So yeah, it's an interesting relationship with New York in particular as a state.
I love what you say about the confidence because
Mm,
I feel the same way.
hmm.
So my parallel story to that is um, this place where you're seeing me right now. Um, I can no longer write in this actual chair because during COVID, I spent so much of this time on this chair on Zoom calls, staring at this green
Uh,
dot. And I used to always be able to write here. And now I associated this chair with with that feeling of almost
yeah.
dread, like, and I can't so I can write in that chair behind me, no problem. It's
No,
not
wait,
the
they're still
room.
in the same room.
Yep, it's because I've associated. Isn't that funny though? But it's the same thing you're talking about. It's not necessarily the place, it's you feel like, okay. And I had John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats on about 10 years ago, and he said he wrote
Yeah.
an entire album at the dining room table, and his quote was, "That's where the mojo was." He just
I love that. You know why I also love that? Because I can't write in my childhood bedroom. I mean, it's not there anymore, but this specific house and my specific childhood bedroom, maybe that was COVID or whatever, but nothing. It was just complete nothingness in this one room. So it's so funny you say that.
the other thing I'm thinking about this, and again, I could tell you so many stories, only because I'm not a songwriter, but what songwriters tell me.
Yeah.
I interviewed Britt Daniel of Spoon, and he said
Love
that,
spoon.
yeah, he told me the great story, and that is that when he first started writing songs, he couldn't afford a couch, so he wrote everything sitting on the floor, and he still has to write to this day on the floor, even though he can clearly afford a couch.
Thank
And
goodness that's the ritual, isn't it? That's
yeah, and
exactly the thing. Yeah.
right, and
Wow.
isn't that, and I thought that he's like, "I can afford a couch, but I find myself just instinctually sitting on the floor whenever I write."
That blows my mind. I also had a chat with a friend of mine who had a similar thing where I can't go to anywhere too beautiful or too nice. So I couldn't go on a holiday in Hawaii, for example, and write anything good. And I also had another friend, this is a bit controversial, and another friend that I adore his material and he's doing really well at the moment. And he was like, Jade, write everything good before you get rich. Because when you get rich, that's when your stuff's gonna get bad.
There's all I mean, and all that stuff's important. I mean, it is. I
You
mean,
know?
if you don't feel good when you start to write, then I believe that firmly. I mean, there's nothing about this desk that has the power to make me a good writer or not, but it's just that I have that feeling, and that's why he writes on the floor, and that's why, someone writes at the dining room table
Yeah.
because, hey, it's happened here and it's gonna happen. So I I I mean, again, whether that's it doesn't matter why. All that matters is that that gives us the feeling.
Yeah, and I think the closest to the human experience you can get is usually the core of that guttural thing of what we get out of the stuff we listen to, or at least I get the stuff out of, that sort of guttural, this person feels exactly how I feel. I think the closer you can get to that universal aspect, again, that's totally debatable for writers, but me personally, the best songs are the ones that have a pretty universal feeling put in a pretty beautiful way, in a condensed way. That's sort of the songs I dream of writing about.
All right, so I'm gonna get very specific here with the process. When it comes to lyrics, are you a pen and paper person or a phone/computer person?
Oh, pen and paper all the way. All the way. I mean, I just hate my phone. If I could put that in the bin tomorrow, I would. Laptops, I don't have such an aggressive anti feeling. I was writing with a girl for a project the other day. She had a laptop. I was like, oh, I appreciate you can sort of delete and move a paragraph or move a verse. But me, I just love the fact it's an artifact of, the history of my work. It's just for me. I got like a stack of books and I can see my handwriting change or the scribbles out or when a chorus completely change. I think that's just just like a whole collection. It feels wholesome, you know?
Because when you see that pen and paper, when you see that your ink or whatever your handwriting from years ago, you can easily go back to that place, put yourself in that spot, right?
Yeah, and I think I remember when I was a kid, I was so hard on myself with just songwriting that's supposed to be this pretty fun thing at the end of the day. It's not that serious. But when I was probably 18, it was, and it still is in ways that are a little bit more healthy, but it was do or die. So when I'm seeing these kind of like etchings and no, Jade, stupid idea. I have quite like a sympathy and an empathy for that Jade, you know?
Okay, Jade, get more specific.
Hmm.
Does color of ink matter and type of paper?
Oh, it actually does for me that I'm realizing how neurotic I am as we're talking. Okay, black pen, I have to write in. Blue pen, I'm convinced I can't write anything good in blue pen. I cannot recall writing one song I've used in blue pen. As far as paper goes, I have a very specific lined notebook. It's got to be lined. Bonus points if I can date it. I'm mental. Bonus points if I can date it, but it's sort of certain thickness as well. So I can achieve the end. Do you know what I mean? It's not too many songs, it's not too little. I don't like half finished notebooks, unseen.
Okay, but did you tell me type of pen? I know color of ink, but does ballpoint, does that matter?
You know what? I don't think that does. I'm not keen on pencil. Pencil's a bit drafty. Pencil's suggesting we're not going to get the finished product. Um, but pen, as long as it's a black pen, we're good.
By the way, it's not neurotic at all. Every songwriter, you probably wouldn't be
No
surprised.
way.
Oh, I mean, down to, oh, yes. Very few of them say, oh, it doesn't matter. It's
I'm so
always,
excited to go back and listen to all these episodes for the record. Genuinely, I cannot wait for
uh,
this.
yeah, I interviewed yesterday John Gorley of Portugal the Man, and he said it was great because I have to go back. He goes, I'm not specific at all. And then literally he told me the specific type of pen and the thickness
No
of the
way.
tip. And he goes, I guess actually I'm pretty specific. And yeah. Um so and I think this goes back to um the preciousness of it because
Mhm.
some people say there's two schools of thought. Some people say that if you are too precious, then that puts more pressure on you when you write. Other people say, no, I deliberately will find like a napkin or the back of a envelope because,
Mhm.
oh, it's not a big deal. And I'll just start to write because that lessens the pressure as opposed to the fancy moleskin notebook.
Yeah. I think it's gotta not be an excuse or in the genre of excuses. You know, I think you can't psych yourself out. So, for example, this is an example of me psyching myself out. When I was in upstate New York, I wrote 3 songs that made my debut record, in this shed. So my producer had this shed, and it was sort of mothballs but this one room where there was a piano, a guitar, and, all them stink bugs you get in upstate New York all on the walls. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, the shed, I need to go back to the shed." And my producer ended up getting rid of the shed. The shed became a storage unit, the shed was no more. And I was head in hands, and in a really heartwarming way, he called me a superstitious freak. And was like, "Jade, like, you can write anywhere. That's a talent that's kind of within, not based on your environment." And I was like, "Fair enough." And I got over myself and I wrote more songs that made more records. But you can take it too far. And there is a little bit, I think maybe there's ritual. Like Patti Smith talks about having numerous coffees, which is, transferable. But then if you do get to, I need to be in this certain chair, I need to be in this, I need quiet, I think maybe that's just stopping yourself from making anything because you're too scared. I think fear is a huge thing in our art form.
I interviewed the writer Anthony Doerr a couple of years ago, and I asked. He won the Pulitzer Prize for this book called "All the Light We Cannot See" about 10 years ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
he's a fiction writer. He's a great writer.
Okay. Love
It's a
to read that.
world,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a World War II historical novel, and I asked him about writer's block, and I'll never forget this because his quote was, "I don't believe in writer's block. Writer's block is a failure of courage."
Whoa. Pass.
And yeah, and his thought was, you just can't be afraid. Like, nothing we say is too precious. Don't feel like you're too special that you can't write this thing. And so his thought was, we get writer's block because we're afraid to start, or we're afraid that the thing that we write, we have to start with the masterpiece. But his thing was just start to write, and that momentum will get you going.
It's, I think, interesting that you say that because a lot of the confidence I take later on in my career is the evidence of my work in the past. So I can be like, well, I wrote this song once. So now I can have the confidence going in that I can write that song again. I can repeat that level that I was really happy and proud of. I think just having dabbled in the novel writing a little bit, like a tiny bit, it's so much harder to have that belief because it's such a long process. And it's like every time you're sort of approaching the mountain, you're going, oh, Am I good enough? Is this good enough? Oh my goodness. I find it the difference of the craft and the sort of strength that it takes to delve into it. So yeah, it just feels quite disparate. But again, not too experienced in the novel writing field, but I have such admiration for you guys because it's pretty crazy the courage it takes. Yeah.
When you cross things out, and again, the answers to these are fascinating. When you cross things out, do you scribble furiously so that you can't see that thing, or do you just cross it out with a single line?
Yes, we're talking a single line. 'Cause like you said, you don't know. It's like that's not gone forever. The only thing is if I'm hovering over the page, I'll doodle a lot. So if I'm sort of in a session and my mind's going blank or whatever, sometimes I'll sort of color in the cross or whatever because 'cause I'm just like my brain's there. But usually it's just like a little, "Oh, no," and move on. But there's a lot of lines, arrows, and stuff like that in my songwriting.
Oh, there is, even on the lined paper. So there's all those arrows and things like that.
Yeah, I'm like, "Oh, actually, that goes here. We're gonna switch this line here. That's a better second verse." Like, there is that going on that's why I write on paper.
So I'm guessing that there's just you're writing inside the margins, outside the margins. It's not really linear, is it?
So it's sort of I wish I could show you a picture. So I always start it's so funny. I'm just thinking about this now. I remember because I was still at school, right, when I was writing, and I remember sort of putting the date, and then I wrote verse 1, like V1. And I was like, "Oh shit, like I'm not writing a song right now." And I had to like scribble it out because that's what I'll do. I'll write V1 and then, we're talking line, 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 line. And then I'll be like, "Oh, that's rubbish cross. Oh, that goes better here, arrow." Then it's chorus, you know? So it's got a template, but it is, and then it goes to chaos.
Okay, one more question before we talk about the novel writing. Whenever things aren't happening for me, I will go take a walk. I find nothing is more restorative and energetic than just getting up and walking around. So, how important is the role of movement, whether it's walking, biking, any type of exercise to your process?
So two things there. First thing, when I'm doing my process, I'm pretty rigid. So if I've gotten up from writing, especially good writing, my back will be sort of stiff because I'm like so focused on what I'm doing and sort of leant over and I'm thinking it's like doing a crossword. I imagine for people, I don't do many of them myself, to be honest. That's not where my talents lie. Um, but it is. I've sat there and I'm staring at this page sometimes, and I'm just like, this will come. And that'll be up to, you're talking an hour and 20 minutes where I'm just like, it's there, and I can see it, I can't manipulate the words to do that beautiful thing that I know will give me that feeling. But obviously, I'm intrigued about the process. And a lot of people say for maths or whatever, or there's this thing that they used to do, Einstein and Salvador Dali, where they would sit on this chair and they would hold a cup and they would wait until they fell asleep. I don't know if you've heard about this. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to stop you there only because not only have I not heard about it, I quote that study to every songwriter.
No way.
Yes, the
No
Salvador Dali
way.
one, and there's a picture of him, and it is a great picture, I'm sure you've seen it, where he's in that and I think he said it has to be an uncomfortable chair,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you when you get in that and they've replicated this in the lab with creative types, so
Oh,
right, just so people know what we're talking about is he holds that skeleton key, and when he falls asleep, when the key drops, it hits the
yeah.
floor, it wakes him up, then he starts to paint.
Yeah, exactly. And they do it specifically when they like are coming to a point of block, or say it's a maths equation and they can't quite reach it. Both of them advocate for it. Just you're in that space of just having slept and it resets your mind almost. Have you tried it? I've not tried it.
I have not, but it's what I really should because like I said, there
Yeah.
was an article about this in some science magazine, Scientific American, I think a couple of years ago. And because they've replicated that, like I said, in the lab with
Yeah.
creative types, it's not just this anecdotal thing of he used to do this. They've done this with people have found that it's productive.
That's insane. Yeah, whenever I heard about it, I was just like, oh, when I'm stuck. that is kind of because I did try it once. I was on this with this, co-writer, and I was away from England, so I was putting all this pressure on myself, like, "Oh, I've come all the way here and I'm getting nothing." And I went for a run that one time, and it was just absolutely so not fruitful in any way. And then I heard about this, and I was like, "Well, maybe I should have done that, you know? Maybe I should have sat on a chair and fallen asleep."
So, are you a morning person? Are you more productive when it's writing in the morning or at night?
Always at night. Although afternoon is the sweet spot, I have found there's a cutoff in the night where if it gets too late, like sort of past 10 p.m., what I'm writing is a bit trash. I got up in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep and I tried writing. It's only fruitful once where I wrote this song. I still love. It's called What Am I Here For? And it's a deep existential sort of, two chords. It's just really very vulnerable, and it was like I was in one of my childhood bedrooms. I moved around a lot, so not the one I mentioned earlier. But I just wrote it, and that's the only one I've written at like 3 a.m. I've noticed when I get up too late or do it too late, I'm usually just like, "Oh, it was okay," you know?
But that's interesting. You said afternoon because for most people, afternoon is when we're at the circadian rhythm, when we're just most fatigued. Most people say early morning, late night, but I don't hear afternoon very often.
No early morning for me whatsoever. Don't ask me to think about songs before 11 a.m. You're a psychopath. That's, what is going on. I don't even know what my name is before then, which is a product of not having a real job in a very long time. I'm aware of the privilege of that. But usually, like songwriters, on the LA circuit or wherever, we all sort of start at 1 p.m. That is the usual session time. And I do feel switched on then. I'm not tired. I haven't got the morning sort of like yawns. And then you do really focus until about, 7 to 9, and then you kind of quit.
I imagine that the novel gives you, and I'm not a novel writer and I'm not a songwriter. So, um, but I
Hmm.
imagine
Hmm.
that as a songwriter, if you go to write a novel, I imagine it's got to be a tremendous sigh of relief because now you feel like you have all this space to write things that you didn't have the space to say in a song, right?
Well, yeah, and I found so my second record was way more character based. So my second record was me exploring, like, for example, my boyfriend, he went to buy a guitar in the middle of Virginia, and he met this war veteran, and he was going through, like, he had, struggling for healthcare at the end of the day, and that's why he was selling this guitar. And he's told me this story, and I was so moved by it. I wrote this song called Red, White, and Blue that I put on my second record. And there were a lot of stories like that were no longer so me centric. And I found it as an outlet for that. And I think the album, it didn't do as well as my first album. And I kind of wondered, maybe from this art form, maybe people get more clarity or more feeling when I do treat it as a journal and it is more about me. But I have this real hunger to write about other people and other journeys. So I was like, well, maybe I try that in a different craft. I'm a writer. I kind of believe that through and through. So maybe I just try this. I'm not sure if I'll write a book one day. That's the dream. But maybe I just try and divert that over here. Do you know what I mean?
Are you setting yourself, are you doing a page limit, page per day, words per day? What's the discipline in that process?
Oh, I mean, usually, like, I got into this rhythm that was really just incredible because I was experiencing probably what you talk to these writers, about, that I've been desperately looking up. Which is why I'm so excited to like listen to the other episodes and hear about their process. Because I found like when I was sitting down and writing 2,000 words a day, that's when the story was really progressing. And then I got into this, having written 60,000 words, I got into this editing phase, and that's where things started to slow down and you start to doubt yourself. So now I'm sort of just picking it back up and trying to fit a touring career while doing it. But again, just so new on the process, it almost like feels strange to even talk about because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I don't think I have any right knowing what something is supposed to look like before I start. To me, at least, the biggest mistake I can make is to say, "Oh, I know. I Here I am. I want to get there, and here's how I'm going to get there." And I think that if I think I know what something's supposed to look like, then I won't allow myself to make any diversions or take some wrong turns in a good way because I'm so focused on I've got to get to that spot. So that's why I say I feel like I have no right knowing what something is supposed to look like before I start.
That's so interesting because I feel that with albums, when I've got so many titles and so many concepts for my albums, and they always somewhere along the way do a little diversion, and then it's like everything changes and the whole contextualization of my body of work over the past year or whatever is changed. Which is why I have an admiration for concept albums. 'Cause I'm like, how have you done that? How have you retained that all the way through? But maybe that's because my process is a bit more instantaneous and my life is changing so quick, or I'm not sure the reasons, but I would love to do a concept record one day, but it's kind of what you're saying. How do you retain that?
All right, last question. Uh, who are your favorite authors? Are you a genre person? Are you a writer person? Who do you like to read?
Yeah, big reader. Although every time someone asks this question, it's like I've never read a book in my life, and I can't remember anybody. My ultimate favorite author of all time is actually Herman Hesse. I remember going to the bookstore when must have been about 18, and I'd read The Glass Bead Game. And to be honest with you, to the extent I don't think I really understood it fully. It's a really dense book, but I felt so moved and like it tapped on all these points. I wanted to learn something. I wanted to feel like something about myself was being reflected and discovered. And I remember literally taking like 3 books and slamming them on the bookstore, and the guy behind the counter being like, "Oh, you're in a Hess hole." And I was like, "Oh, this is a thing, this is a thing." So he's my absolute favorite.
It's funny you say that because when I finish reading a book, my first thought is I want to get another voice in my head. So I will never read another book by the same author. I always feel like I want to read something else. That's why I like reading short story anthologies
Wow.
because a short story anthology is going to have 20 different voices in it. And I love that feeling of, oh, I didn't read anything like this a few
Yeah.
minutes ago.
That's fascinating
So
because 'cause I'm so about the person. So if I'm reading a book and I get on with it, I wanna know how they came to like, what their background was, what inspired I'm a big Googler of authors I love, so we're totally the opposite there, Ben. That's really interesting.
okay, one more follow-up to that. Can you read more than one book at a time?
Yes.
You're
I so
very
I
you were very deliberate. Yeah, how many?
Yeah, I do usually 2 fiction, 1 non-fiction. So sometimes I'll sort of like delve into a little bit of, but usually I have to sort of, it's the same thing we're talking about, focus on one thing and do that well instead of like, too many getting too many pans going in the kitchen. But I switch from fiction to non-fiction pretty purposefully because I'm like, okay, I want to learn something now. Okay, now I want to go into someone's world. But we're only talking 2. It's nothing crazy.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget you can find all the episodes on all major streaming platforms and also at the Songwriters on Process website. That is at songwritersonpodcast.com. Pre 2020, this was not a pod. I was transcribing all of the interviews. So you can find all of them, hundreds of them, many hundreds of them on the Songwriters on Process website. You'll find both the transcribed interviews and the pod there. Take a deep dive, spend a day. These are great conversations with songwriters just about the writing process. Also, my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, is out now worldwide on Hachette Books. You can find it online in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God, and it's his memoir. Again, that is called Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari. I am biased, but that's a damn good book. My email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. I love suggestions, questions, comments. People always email me and tell me who they want to see on the pod next. You never know. Send me an email, ben@songwritersonprocess.com. That's it for me, everyone. Have a great day.